This is a rapier, the most dangerous thrusting sword in the world. You may ask yourself, is it one of the floppy ones that don't thrust effectively? Do you feel lucky? Well, do you, peasant? I've complained about overly flexible rapier blades in the past, and I'm not the only one. In fact, this is one of the rapiers that I criticized for being excessively flexible. Was that a fair and valid criticism? Well, in extreme cases I would say yes, like this example, which I'm compelled to describe as a floppy noodle that would whip around from even just shaking it vigorously. This, on the other hand, I've now realized is not that bad at all, really. Or at least for this blade shape, there isn't a whole lot you can do to improve that. If you want to improve your accuracy with a rapier, you can try the ring challenge, also called the do not hit your camera challenge. Don't do with these though, they're way too nice. Shenanigans aside, I very much appreciate the ongoing sponsorship by Thorum, a US-based small business handcrafting these rings with a lot of care. There are all kinds of designs for different tastes. Personally, I really like both the synthetic fire opal in all its glorious fanciness and this more down-to-earth utilitarian design for hard everyday use. Plenty of interesting materials to choose from as well. Pattern welded steel, stainless steel, meteoric iron, tungsten, stone, antler, bone, various types of wood, and newly added carbon fiber. For example, there's this beautiful design made of forged carbon fiber with gold leaf in a marbled pattern. I like the diversity in all these designs, and of course the quality, which I'm personally very happy with. So do like the edgy blue hedgehog and get you some rings through the link in the description below. Or watches, or what else might be added in the future. In a recent video where I tested rapiers against riveted mail, linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet, some people echoed this frustration with flexible rapiers and were saying that's not good. And of course, the more it flexes, the more it takes away from the thrust. It absorbs some of the force into the flexing action, technical term, instead of driving into the target as stiffly as possible. However, the fact that this cup-hilt rapier flexed violently as it hit the steel of overlapping mail rings and sprang back to its straight shape without taking a permanent set is a testament to how well made it is. And like Matt Easton talked about and visually demonstrated on the Schola Gladiatoria channel, some original historical rapiers are quite flexible. Anyway, so could you fix this rapier blade and make it stiffer? Yes. Does that come at a price? Also yes. I used to overestimate how much you can do with the heat treatment. You can alter the hardness within a certain margin. You can differentially heat treat a blade to make a softer spine or center and a harder edge. But with a blade like this, it's pretty limited how far you can go. Why is this blade shaped the way it is anyway? Why is it so narrow? Because it emphasizes thrusting over cutting. And of course, the narrower it is, the less resistance it encounters as it goes into the target. And also, importantly, the lighter it is. How you would fix this is by making it thicker if you wanted to maintain the same blade width. What happens if you make it thicker? It's going to be balanced more forward. As it is, of course, you have quite a bit of metal in the hilt here with the cup. And so the balance is quite close to the hilt, which is useful, particularly here, because that means you have a whole lot of blade control. It makes it easier to disengage and direct the blade with more accuracy to a certain target. And of course, it's lighter, so it doesn't fatigue you as much. If you take one piece of steel and make several different sword types out of it, you can look at it almost as working with a certain pool of points that you then allocate to certain strengths and weaknesses, like ability to thrust, cutting power, defensive value. These two swords are a good visual illustration of that because they weigh almost exactly the same, yet they couldn't be much more different. So you could turn the same lump of steel either into a pretty simple sword with modest reach that cuts well and can also thrust pretty well and doesn't have any bells or whistles, doesn't offer hand protection. It's best combined with a shield or buckler, or into a sword with dramatically increased reach that gives up on cutting almost entirely in favor of the thrust, and that boosts its defensive stat, so to speak, by sort of including a miniaturized buckler in its design. Not quite, but sort of. This rapier, on the other hand, has pretty much the same length, but balances cuts and thrusts much more. In fact, this cuts remarkably well, at the expense of being 200 grams heavier. Now, the balance isn't even all that different. This is also balanced pretty close to the hilt. So you'd think, well, that should be quite similar, right? But when I hold them both in hand, this one feels a lot lighter than the other and is quicker to move around. Well, this one takes quite a bit more to accelerate, stop, and redirect. And the point control isn't anywhere near as good, as lively as the cup-hilt rapier. This one is also about the same length and, as you can see, quite a bit narrower. So this handles more like the cup-hilt rapier. It's quite easy to cut with and, again, control the point with a good amount of precision. The heavier rapier I can bend by hand quite a bit too, but it didn't flex anywhere near as much in the test when encountering hard resistance as the cup-hilt rapier blade did. The Pappenheimer rapier I have here has a slightly longer blade and weighs a little bit less, but you can see the blade is significantly narrower. Of course, this one's quite flexible, mostly in the last third because it's for practice. When comparing the blade thickness, the better cutting rapier, right around the sweet spot where you would cut with it, 3.5 to 4 millimeters thick. The lighter cup-hilt rapier in about the same spot has a thickness of 4 millimeters as well. Whereas this one sits at around, can you take a guess? 3.5 to 4 millimeters. This Pappenheimer rapier, oh wow, it's totally different, just kidding, 3.5. Then we've got the swept hilt cut and thrust sword, which weighs the same as the heavier rapier, but feels much different. This one is more agile. Why? Because for one, it's significantly shorter than the rapier, and because of the profile taper. This rapier has almost no profile taper. The edges stay parallel-ish for most of it. And this one cuts very well. Not quite as well as, say, a Messer with its wide blade, but this is certainly no slouch, and it thrusts extremely well. Partially also because it's significantly stiffer than the others. So overall, this is a more well-rounded package, but it doesn't have quite the same reach. And for a final comparison, we have this Han Dynasty Jin, which is also what I would consider a cut and thrust sword. You know, the blade is fairly narrow, somewhat rapier-like. I would not call this a rapier simply because it's not used the same way and it doesn't have complex hand protection. But when you look at just the blade itself, it does kind of fall into rapier / side sword territory. The difference is because there is no complex hilt here, it's overall quite a bit lighter. So the balance is significantly further out than in case of the rapiers, still not all that far, but overall it's that much lighter, so you don't need that much counterweight anyway. So this is a different sort of approach. It does not come with integrated protection, so you might want a shield or buckler or gauntlets, or at least a fighting style that's aware of how exposed the hand is and works to keep it safe. Now you could debate which approach is better, or rather what fits your particular application best. I know what a certain cranky Englishman would prefer, but either way, the flexibility here is not a fault, it's just a byproduct. You could absolutely make this blade thicker and thereby stiffer, but that comes at a price. So now it's going to be more exhausting to use and not quite as agile. Now, of course, a stronger fencer can get away with a heavier blade and basically use it to the same effect. But that's the general issue that you're dealing with here. Unless you just want to say screw it and go all in with either an Estoc or some forms of small sword with a very thick triangular or diamond cross section. So at that point, it's just a pointy metal bar. Anyway, hope you found this interesting. Quick reminder, you can in fact like or dislike this video. There are like clicky things down there. I keep forgetting it myself. Hey, before you go start a nerd war about the bestest sword ever, here's some outtakes. I couldn't decide what weird shenanigans to start the video with, so I did them all. You're welcome. Must resist urge to start video with dirty joke. Hey, are you ready to talk about stiffness and thrusting? How to get the video demonetized within 15 seconds. Speaking of which, you might want to check out my Patreon. Just for no particular reason, just there's bonus stuff and whatnot. Thanks. Everybody likes rapiers, right? So let's talk about what happens when they're too floppy. Surprise! Thanks for watching, and take care, folks. Stay thrusty.